Welcome to ex5-php-table part 3, and in part 3 we're going to do some CSS styling to make our table look a little better. So far we have a table and it's organizing our information in rows and columns, but it looks a little bland, and what we're going to try and do is just space it out a little bit better and maybe even add a little bit of color to it, a little bit of, maybe change the font, maybe indent a little bit. So we're going to just start with some spacing at the beginning, and then we'll kind of work from there, and I'll show you how you can target HTML from CSS. So I'm going to go back to my brackets. Now, in order to use CSS in this page, we're not going to use an external style sheet. We'll do it right inside this page. What we're going to do is go inside our head tag. We want to be inside our head tag. So right after the title, we want to basically put a style element, and we're going to put an opening tag for style and then a closing, just like we did for our table. And what we're going to do is put different styles in here. We're going to be able to target certain elements. So let's just target the table, for example. So when you target the element, it's called the selector. You don't have to put it in its tags. That's only when it's in HTML. But in CSS, you just put table, and that's going to target the table or any table on the page. And then we're going to use these kind of curly braces. If you do a left one, it should make a right one, and I'll hit return. So it kind of shows up like that. So there's the opening, there's the closing curly brace. And what I'm going to put in for table, I'll just do something really simple. I'll just call it margin left. This will just move it away from the side of the page. You could do margin on all sides, or you could do individual sides like left, right, top, and bottom. So I'm just going to do margin left. And for a distance right now, I'm going to use a measurement called ems, EM. And basically 1 em is basically equivalent to whatever the default point size is, or for example, 16 pixels is the default size for most web pages. So 1 em is typically equal to 16 pixels. So it's about the size of a character. So that you could look at it like that. So, maybe I would be like 3 characters over or 4 characters over. For example, if I did 4 em, and it's like that, it's em. And in CSS, there's no space between the number and the unit. If you had pixels, it would have to be like that. You would not put a space like that. So I'm going to put EM, and we'll just see how it works. We'll put EM, and I'll put a semicolon. You should also end all of these declarations. This is a selector, and this is a declaration, and the whole thing is called a declaration block. But we just call them styles sometimes. But we're going to say for the table, select the table, and do margin left for M, and I'll just save it. And it should go and find the table. There's the table. It should find that and basically kind of put a margin to the left of it of about 4em. And I'll save it, and I'll see what that looks like. And you can see what it did. That's about 4em. That's about 16 pixels times 4. So it's about 64 pixels is what it's doing right now. And again, it's not 1 character over. It's actually the height by default. So I guess that's okay for now. We'll leave it like that for now. That seems to work okay. And now what we might do, you can see these are jammed a little together. We might put something called padding. Padding is the space inside a cell, because we kind of went outside of here. Padding, margin is kind of outside. Padding is inside. It's the inside part of a cell. If I go back to this graphic, padding is this area in here. That's where you would see padding. That's what's considered padding. So we're going to put space inside a cell around our content. So what I'm going to do is put a little padding, and I could target the TDs. So each TD, I could say put a little space to the right of it. So I'm going to target TD now. That's the TD element. It's not the row. I'm actually going to just target the TD, and I'll do it the same way. I'll do the opening and closing curly brace, and I'll just put padding right, and just to see how it looks. I'll put padding right. And remember, I said it could go on all sides, but for now, let's just try padding right. And I'll do 1em and just see what that works. I'll put a semicolon, I'll save it, and I'll refresh it. And you can see what it did. It didn't put a lot, just did a little bit, but just enough. And again, it looks like it's really spaced out here, but it's just because this line is very long. But that's the way it's showing up. So if we wanted to put a little more, we could put more, but that's okay right now. And what I'm also going to do, if we wanted to, we could actually put like a background color behind some of these. Be nice if it was every other one, because you've seen tables like that where they kind of color every one. If we just colored it all, it might look okay, but what if we colored every other one? Wow, how can you do that? Well, there's actually a CSS selector kind of attribute that can do that, and I'll show you what that is. That's actually going to be for row, so we'll do it for table row. We'll go for TR, and we're going to do something called background color, and here's background color. It's background dash color, and I'll choose aqua for right now. Now aqua is going to be too bright, so I'm going to control click on aqua and choose a quick edit. So I control click or right click and did quick edit, and then I could go here, and if it's really bright I could kind of move it over here so it's a little kind of a grayer kind of color. So I'll just kind of move it over here a little bit so it's a little faded, and if I hit this X it'll put that color in. So if I save this, let's just see what that does. Now that makes everything that blue color. Now a couple things you'll notice is if we're putting a background color, since we did padding right, it's only putting padding on the right, so we might actually want padding left. So we might have to adjust our padding now that we're kind of using a background color, but that's okay. Another thing we want to do is let's alternate. We could start with the top one being a color, and then the next one and the next one, they would be the odd rows. So how would you target the odd rows? And this is something, you'd have to look this up. I had to look it up, but that's okay. But there is a way to do it. They use something called nth child, that you can actually find certain numbers within a list of things or within a row of things. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do something called TR, and I'll put a colon, and it's called nth dash child. And you could put a number like the third one, like just for example, I'll put a 3 in here. And I'll just show you what happens. There's a 3. It's called TR colon nth child 3, and that's changed the background color. And if I save that, and if I go here and refresh it, it should color this one a blue. And that's what it did. Now, we're not going to use just that one, or, you know, we could try to figure them out and say, oh, well, okay, let's do 1, 3, whatever. But, you know, if we're doing different queries, we would never know how many numbers we have and what we should do. So they do have something where you can actually go in here and put odd. So it would be TR nth child odd. And I'll save it. And look at that. That looks pretty good. And if we want to fix our spacing a little bit, we might want to put the same amount of spacing on either side, or maybe a little less. We did like 1 em. Maybe we'll do like half an em, but we'll do it all around. So we could go up and change that. So here we had the TDs. We said padding right, and we had 1 em. Well, instead of padding right, we could just use padding. Padding would go on all sides. And maybe instead of 1 em, I'll try 0.5 em and see how that looks right now. That would be half. And I'll save that, and I'll refresh. And that looks pretty good. You know, maybe that might be a little much. It's putting a lot of space on the top and bottom. You know, maybe I'll make it 0.4. We'll just do that for now. We don't have to get really that specific. It's looking pretty good, so that's good. So there we have our 0.4 em all around. So that looks pretty nice compared to what we had. And you could change that color if you don't like the color, if it's too blue or anything like that. Even if you want to put a border on here, you can go and put a border on your TD. You can put a border around here. I could go here and put border. And you could put, if you just do border, it puts it on all sides. And the border, use border colon. And they actually have 3 properties for border. You actually put the thickness, which let's just say like, you know, 1 pixel. And then the style, which would be solid. That's what we use the most. And then there's always the color. And we can just write black. If we just want black, we could just type black for now. We don't even have to use the hex color. We could just use black. So if we put a border on our TD, now I think this leaves a little bit of space, but I think that's okay for what we're doing. You can see it puts there's a little gap left. That's a default that's in there, but it still looks okay. We could even put I think a background color of the table. Might put a color behind that, but look how nice that looks. That looks pretty good. So that's our CSS styling that. So there's all kinds of things you could do with it. If you want to change the font, you could go to your table and say, hey, let's change the font. I don't like it being in that Times font. Let's go to font family and let's put sans serif in there. And now it puts sans serif here as a kind of a default, but what we usually do is specify certain sans serif fonts. I'm going to put Tahoma. I like it because it has my name in it. And I'll put a comma. And then this basically font family goes first choice, second choice, third choice, based on what people would have activated on their system. So if they wouldn't have Tahoma, maybe they would have Verdania. And if they wouldn't have Verdania, they should have Arial. Everybody should have Arial. You know, maybe they have Helvetica or something. And if they don't have that, then it uses whatever their default sans serif is on their browser. Everybody has default set up on their browser. Usually they're like Times and things like that. And there's monospace fonts. So anyway, if we put table and we said use the font family of that, make sure you put your semicolon at the end. If I save it and refresh it, you can see now it puts it in that font. And the sans serif appears a little bit bigger, so that's why it's a little easier to read. That's because the lowercase letters are a little bit big. But look how nice that looks right now compared to what we started. And now it doesn't matter what we do. I could go back to brackets, and if I decided I want to run any kind of query right now, you know, I want to do where the continent is, let's say Africa, and I'll save that, and I'll run a query, and there's Africa. There's all the countries in Africa. Now, how many are here? I don't know. I guess I'd have to count them all. Wouldn't it be nice if we could display how many rows are here? And this looks like a good place to actually stop and take a break, and we'll continue with part 4, where we'll actually create a function that'll show the number of rows.